Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here, commencing a history of the world in about 30 minutes. Now, I debated on where to start, and I'm going to start at the very beginning. So, a star that we don't know much about blew up, and out of that many other stars were born. Among those, our own sun. It used to be a solar system, it used to be a nebula, it turned into a solar system. Rotational forces and gravity brought the planets together. The sun is a mass of helium large enough to compress so that at the center it's hot enough to start a nuclear reaction. We don't know that for sure. There are some people who contest that stars are even of that nature, but that's the current majority theory, if you will. So the sun pops out with 9 planets and the Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. There we go. There's the Earth, 4.5 billion years old. Now, I have a book here, Scientific American, The Fossil Record and Evolution. The book is The Fossil Record and Evolution. It's published by Scientific American, with introductions by Leo Laporte. Now, this was published, copyrights beginning in 61 and going up to 82. On page 14 of this book, it has a period chart of world history. And the first 4.5, I would hold up for the camera, but this stupid program mirrors things. So I can't, the stuff you're seeing behind me is actually not like that. It's actually backwards. 4.5 billion year old Earth, it sits there for 1 billion years before life starts. So if Earth just had to have perfect conditions or whatever, it sure took a long time for the perfect conditions to come around, didn't it? So at 3.5 billion years ago, life begins. Now, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden there was a dinosaur. Okay? What kind of life? Single-celled, anaerobic bacteria. Photosynthetic bacteria didn't come around for another billion years. That's 999 million years plus 1 million years. That's a long time to go with single-celled bacteria before these things were able to gain any energy or use the light of the sun. Very odd. And you keep going. There's another billion years that pass before algae evolves. So here we are now. It's 1.5 billion years ago. That's 999 million plus 501 million years ago. Nothing but single-cell bacteria on this planet. Nothing but algae, photosynthetic cyanobacteria, and anaerobic bacteria. That's it for the first 2 billion years. Now you've got algae. You think you've gotten somewhere. Passes another 900 million years before multicellular life. Another 900 million after we've already spent 3 billion years in that way. So, 2 billion, pardon me. So it's nearly 3 billion years of single-cell bacteria before 2 cells stick together and can get something done. Multicellular plants and animals start, therefore, at about 570 million. So in 3 billion years, you go from a single-cell organism to 2 cells stuck together. Then in 570 million years, you go from 2 cells stuck together all the way up to dinosaurs and then humans, intelligence that can think about itself in a much, much, much shorter time frame. We're going to see this again later when we talk about progress in agriculture and stuff. There's this concept that progress is exponential. Ray Kurzweil is Kurzweil, I believe. Ray Kurzweil is an excellent intellectual or something futurist to listen to on these ideas. Anyway, to return to multicellular life. And at that point, I'm just going to skip to humans, because this gentleman wanted a history of the world, and I think we've already done enough on prehistory. Let's skip to history. Now I have a book by Chester G. Starr, Early Man. Now I have a video series called The Rise of Civilization, I believe, where I go into great detail with this book. But here we only need a couple of facts from it. The origin of stone tools was a long time ago, around 700,000 years. I've looked for the exact quote. It may not be in this book, but about 700,000 years ago, the first stone tools appear. And they were the axe, hand axe, shaped like this. And they were around for a very long time in very similar circumstances, very similar patterns, very similar make, very similar construction of these things. For a very, very long time, hundreds of thousands of years, in fact, before stone tools got more and more intricate. And eventually they did. We've found Stone Age, Paleolithic Age tools where they've got needles and hair combs and all kinds of weird things. Some of the things we don't understand or know what they were for. So now I quote from page 22 about this burst of progress. There's this long period of stone toolery and so on, but quote, "In the period from 30,000 to 10,000 BC, mankind made advances of a variety not seen earlier. 20,000 years may seem an eternity to us, but measured against the preceding hundreds of thousands of years of apparent stagnation, these changes took place in a moment." Now, hundreds of thousands of years of apparent stagnation, again, if we look at it on an exponential scale, if your progress is slow enough, and if you're dealing with a few hundred human beings across the planet, or a few thousands, or a few tens of thousands of human beings, and they're scattered in little teeny tribes no bigger than 20 or 30 people, your progress is going to be incremental, it's going to be teeny, and it's going to go backwards once in a while when progress is lost or forgotten or wiped off the earth in accidents or famine or plague or whatever. So progress will be slow for a very long time, but eventually it's like the single cell bacteria. Eventually two of them stick together and then you're off to the races. And eventually, sort of in a sense, you had all these little groups of humans, and eventually you had a situation where you could stick a few groups together, called a city. But in order to do that, you need agriculture. Well, that's what this period of progress from 30,000 to 10,000 BC involved. The shift to agriculture, involving things like husbandry, and there's a word for there's hunting and gathering. There's a word for the in-between, where you'd find wild plants and take care of them. I go over this word in my other videos on the rise of civilization. But you find wild plants and animals and take care of those. Raising wild plants and animals and domesticating them is another step. And that's what brings us to the rise of civilization and humans. Now, there were several places on the planet where there's always a tractor or motorcycle going by. There are several places on the planet where civilization occurred simultaneously, almost, not quite. And they are in China, in India, in the Indus Valley, in Mesopotamia, and in Egypt, in the Nile River. Mesopotamia is the two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. These areas, the locations, all have one thing in common: very reliable water for agriculture. No matter what time of year, no matter how dry the year, these rivers didn't run dry. They probably did there may have been some catastrophe or something, but these are very big rivers. It's like the Mississippi. Couldn't run dry even in a dry year. It couldn't. Why didn't civilization start on the Mississippi then? I don't know. You got me. Maybe because too many thunderstorms and the Mississippi floods too violently or something. But maybe because I I don't know. There's something about America. It was bad for people's brains for a long time until Columbus or something like that. But the major civilizations of the world started on rivers. Not every river got a major civilization, but every major civilization started on a river. And the health of humans noticeably depreciated for a time. I don't know if they noticed it back then, but in archaeological records we can notice that the people who were hunters and gatherers had healthier teeth and bones, and people who lived in the city-states less so. And part of that is because they, instead of having a rounded diet, where you get just anything you can get, anything to eat, you'll eat. So you get some nuts and berries, you get some fresh meat, some vegetables, anything. Whereas if you live in a city and you buy your food, you might only buy wheat, and you might only have money for meat once in a while. So just a diet of wheat or barley would be less healthy than a rounded diet. And it is backwards, it's counterintuitive to think that as we progressed, our health went backwards. We were more susceptible, therefore, to disease and stuff just at the time when we move into cities and we have too much susceptibility to disease because of the circumstances. Now, agriculture goes on for a while until a system of, and these city-states and so on, until systems of writing have to come about. And they originally came about in Mesopotamia through trade. We have a pretty good record of because they would put, the Babylonians would store in storehouses, they would have records and stuff, and on clay tablets, and it's called cuneiform, and they push impressions in there and stuff with a stylus or a stick. And some of these things collapsed, and they didn't dig them out. Some of them probably were still standing way after the Babylonians were gone and history had forgotten them. And then the buildings collapsed, and no one was around to dig the stuff out. No one cared, and it waited for modern archaeologists. So we dig this stuff up, and we find, in the earliest times, we find little animals like a sheep or whatever, just an actual figurine, and you would push this into the clay tablet as many times as you needed to represent how many sheep were on the boat, or how many sheep were in this herd that was being purchased or sold or whatever. So actual physical representations. Eventually these cute little figurines, which we've actually found, little figurines used to do this, gave way to just, to hell with the little figurines, we'll have, a stick, and we'll just have a sign for the figurines. Then, in what is today modern Israel, people called the Phoenicians said, well, let's not have a sign for cow or whatever. Let's have a sign for the sound k and the sound and the sound w, cow. They didn't start with that word, but you get the idea. They assigned sound to the letter. And that's where we get, the prefix phone means sound, doesn't it? Because a telephone is a distance sound, and so on. So we owe it to the ancient Israelites, the people that we call the Phoenicians now, that we have an alphabet based on sound. They were the first ones to get to it. In fact, even thousands of years later, other civilizations hadn't caught up. And to this day, China and Japan do not have a sound-based. They don't have a phonetic alphabet, do they? They use English if they're going to go that way. Truly is easier to use. Now then, when writing came about, you had a whole new situation from previous ages. Now you have people who have to sit around and study these things. And as difficult as it is to learn grammar and reading and writing and punctuation and all that today, you have to be exposed to a lot of, you have to read a lot, and you have to learn it in school and so on. As difficult as it is today, back then they had less orderliness to it. And it was more haphazard. And instead of, the 26 letters that we have, or the 33 that some alphabets have or whatever, how about hundreds of letters, or like the Chinese with thousands of letter words. So at the beginning, it was the province of a special class of people, of the priests, people who were paid to or were sustained for the purpose of studying and knowing how to write, to be scribes. They may have had farms on the side, probably everybody did mostly, I don't know. Thousands of years later in the American Revolution, every one of the presidents went back to his farm when he was done. Everybody had a farm. Even lawyers had farms. They lived on farms. But these scribes were one of the first really learned classes in history. And they developed, of course, extra power and prestige from that. And they became the priestly class and the ruling class in some societies. But that's a different story. The next session will be from. We'll look at the important civilizations: Persia, Greece, Egypt, Rome, the Dark Ages, modern history.